Thank you, Steve, and thank you. The real truth about health. It's amazing to be here, and of course, you are why we are here. You present here and live streaming and watching in distant days and months and years, because it's about empowerment. And remember what is power? Knowledge is power. So knowledge is what I want to share with you today to empower you to make good decisions, good health decisions for yourself and in relationship to the medical community. So, Steve, did you make off with the pointer? Aha, thank you. Missing element. And the green arrow is not moving. There we go. So imaging of the breast is what we're going to start with. We've got a lot of information to cover today, so I just wanted to, we're going to get going. Let me say, first of all, to repeat kind of what Steve said, nothing that I say today or in this lecture is meant to diagnose, treat, or cure any disease. I am not speaking to you as a licensed physician of any state of the United States. I am speaking to you as the Minister of Health of the Southern Cherokee Nation, Red Fire people, a foreign nation state to the U.S. government. So let's talk about the different ways to image the breast currently. There are tests of anatomy, which most of us are familiar with. So test of anatomy, ultrasound, we bounce sound waves in, get an image back, MRIs, we're familiar with that technology, a big Tesla coil and imaging through that. And then mammograms, the current, quote, standard of care, which uses x-rays to image the breast. A non-anatomical test, a test that studies physiology, is thermography. And so it's a whole different category of test. The female breast is of great interest to everyone for different reasons, but we're all interested in the feminine breast. And we can see, you ladies, how many ladies in this room have had a mammogram? Now, you can tell me right off, there's several things wrong with that picture. What is one of them? The breast is not properly smashed, okay? It's not pancaked. This breast would be flat, that plate would be pressed down, and they call it pancaking because they're going to smash the breast. The next thing is the tech is not standing behind the lead wall. She's in the room. So, but that's basically what a mammogram machine looks like. The ionizing radiation comes out of here, goes through the breast, scatters across the chest, and on down. And that's what it looks like. And this is what they're looking for, calcium deposits. So the sensitivity of a mammogram varies all according to age. If you're a woman below 50 years of old, the sensitivity is 52%. If you're in your 70s, the sensitivity eases on up. What does sensitivity mean? It means if it's there, does the test find it? And so basically that means that if you have breast cancer and you're below 50, mammograms are going to miss it half of the time. That is not what I would call a good screening test. And so there's some of the reasons why the sensitivity changes. But interestingly, it doesn't detect the most aggressive form of cancer at all, inflammatory breast cancer. So the premenopausal breast, the woman younger than 50, are especially sensitive to radiation. And we're going to give them the benefit of the doubt by saying at least there are estimates that each mammogram increases the risk of breast cancer up to 5%. We're going to be very conservative, use the most conservative number here and say 1%. So every time you take a mammogram, your chances of having breast cancer go up 1%. So how did this happen? There was a thing called the two-county trials back in 1985. It was published in The Lancet, a very prestigious journal, which showed that there was a whopping 31% reduction in mortality, that's deaths, for women that got mammograms. And the New York trial showed a 35% reduction in death. That's huge. Every woman should be getting that test, if that is the truth. Who is it? Will Rogers said, "Figures don't lie, but liars do a lot of figuring." Getsky, I always say that wrong. Gutsy, I think is actually the way you pronounce it. Peter Gutsy, MD, who was in charge of this for the Nordic Cochrane Center. The Danish government, the Swedes were getting mammograms across the aisle there. They were allowed, and everyone was allowed to get them. So the Danes wanted to provide everything for their women that the Swedes were. But they decided to do it scientifically, so they asked the Nordic Cochrane Center, which is the most prestigious analytical center in the world, to study it. And the conclusion was, and this is actually a dumbed down conclusion, which the Danish government put out, and we'll show you the real conclusion in the next slide, was that the scientific basis of mammography screening was very uncertain. We cannot exclude the possibility that screening does more harm than good. Now that's the dumbed down version. The real version was published the next year in The Lancet because the Danish government wouldn't allow the Cochrane Center to say what it wanted to say. But the following year, they got, again, The Lancet is one of the 4 most prestigious medical journals in the world, and they were able to publish what they really thought about mammograms. There's no decrease in cancer mortality, that's death. Screening with mammography is unjustified. And here's the big one. Mammograms cause a 4% increase in mortality. That's death. We're not talking about sickness or disease or getting breast cancer only. We're talking about dying. If I knew there was a 4% chance of dying today if I stepped out of the side of this hotel, do you know where I would spend my day? In the hotel. 4% when you're talking about death is a big number. So a 4% increase in mortality and death rates for women that get mammograms. Why on earth would any woman ever get a mammogram? Increase of 4% chance of dying. This was by the most prestigious analytical center in the world. And so here's, and you can quote me on this. So mammography is not the screening device that detects breast cancer early enough to change the outcome. It has become part of the problem, increasing a woman's chance of breast cancer morbidity and mortality. You can quote me on that. So early detection saves lives. That's the mantra. Well, that is true. Early detection does save lives. And then that's coupled with, get your mammogram today. Now, we know that in sales lingo as bait and switch, or coupling a non-truth with something that people know and believe. The problem is that mammograms are not early detection. And so therefore, they don't save lives. Let's look at the life of a cancer cell here. So on day 1, you've got 1 cancer cell. 3 months later, you've got 2. A year later, you've got 16 cells. We don't have a problem here yet, now do we? We've only got, at 2 years, we've only got 256 cells. So it's not until somewhere down here that mammograms can even detect a breast cancer. So let's talk about size for a minute, because size matters. We all know that. Well, 1 centimeter tumor is about 5 billion cells. That's B with a billion, 5 billion cells. Okay, that's a lot of cells. A half a centimeter is about 1 billion cells, which is pretty close to where a mammogram can detect it. So somewhere around in here, we're talking average growth rates here, 7 to 8 years, it will breach 2 billion cells and 3 billion cells and be detectable on a mammogram. Well, what if we could detect it sooner? So 1 billion cells, it's already spread into the lymphatics by then. There's already circulating tumor cells in the blood. It's too late. That detection is too late when you're 7 or 8 years into this situation. So the single most effective way, and this is Peter Gutsky again. I just keep killing that name. He said the most effective way to decrease a woman's risk of becoming a breast cancer patient is to avoid mammogram screening. So let's move on. Let's talk about other forms of imaging. MRI, great way. There's no irradiation. This is what a cancer would look like on an MRI. Pros and cons. It's pretty new. And it takes literally decades, a couple of decades, for a new technology for them to get enough of the testing machines out there and doctors well enough trained to read them for them to be a good test. So it's just not there yet. A lot of doctors haven't been trained how to read these at this point. It is a sensitive test. It's expensive. Contrast, which is radioactive material, is frequently used, and we've got problems with that. And it's not available unless you get the mammogram first. So now you've already got the radiation, the cancer-causing radiation. Let's move on. Let's look at thermograms and ultrasounds here for a second. So this is what a thermogram picture looks like, and I'm going to back up there a second. So that was a 14 centimeter breast tumor. That's about 6 inches by 4 inches, 10 centimeters high. And that's pretty obvious. Here's what it looks like on ultrasound. Ultrasound plus thermography, which is what I recommend women do, gives you a 96% sensitivity and a 98% specificity. Remember where we were on mammograms for women under 50? 52%. Which test do you want? 52% sensitive, missing half of all cancers, or we can do better. Here's what a thermal camera looks like. It just is it's a camera. It just takes pictures of infrared heat coming off the body instead of black and white or color like we see. It looks at the infrared spectrum, the spectrum that is involved in heat. We've all seen these pictures of missiles going into Syria or Iraq or Afghanistan or whatever, being guided by thermal cameras because they're heat-seeking missiles. That's why they call them heat-seeking missiles. This technology was indeed developed by the military. We're just using it for medical purposes, and it works phenomenally. So thermography is the most underutilized imaging technique today. Thermography is simply a camera that takes a picture of the infrared spectrum. There's no squeezing. You don't get the breast pancake. You don't get it damaged by squeezing. There are no cancer-causing x-rays. What if we called mammograms breast x-rays? You think that would change your perception? But no, they're mammograms. Isn't that cute and cuddly? A mammogram. Oh, just a mammogram. Not breast x-rays. Oh, don't breast x-rays cause cancer? Oh, no, it's a mammogram. Oh. Nothing touches you. So thermography has some distinct advantages there. So this is a picture of a thermogram. One of the things that we're really careful about is to look at the temperatures of the nipples. We're comparing one breast to the other. We're particularly interested in the nipples because what are most breast cancers? They're called ductal carcinoma in situ. Ductal, what duct? The milk ducts. So the cancer grows in the milk ducts, and where do the milk ducts wind up? At the nipple, of course. And so the nipples, when there's cancer growing down in the ducts, get hotter. So a very important area to look at on thermograms is comparing one nipple temperature to the other. So here's that picture that we saw earlier with that cancer. I'll show you a series of pictures, the most amazing series of thermography pictures ever taken here in a few minutes. Here's what the breast looks like when you get pregnant. They just explosive growth. The ducts are developing, getting ready to lactate, and so yeah, you can diagnose pregnancy on a thermogram. We can obviously we've got cancer going on over here. This is a series that I was talking about. I was involved in this case. So March 16th, we took our first picture, treating this lady so you can not only see problems coming with thermography. You do your thermogram, repeat it the next year, and if you've got a spot that's getting hotter, redder, the nipple's getting hotter, then you need to pay attention, because remember, it took 8 to 10 years for that breast cancer to develop. So if we can detect it back down at 6 years or 5 years or 4 years, and that's where thermography really holds golden. But we can watch our progress of treatment too, and so this was a beautiful progression of treatment. So on April 23rd, that was at a place where, as a reading thermographer, I could no longer say there's cancer there. Now, we knew there were. This was biopsy proven. This mass had literally come through the skin and had fungated and was an open wound on the skin. So simply an amazing series of thermograms taken by Dr. Galena Migalko at Universal Medical Imaging. So thermography is all according to which camera is being read, what program is being used to interpret, and the doctor interpreting somewhere between 80 and 90% sensitive. It's the only screening test that can detect inflammatory breast cancer. Thermography is not FDA approved as a standalone test. Now, you don't need a prescription to get it. You don't need the FDA's approval, but if we're looking for that, it's not approved as a standalone test, only as an adjunct test, which is supposed to be done with a test of anatomy. So we've got 3 choices there, and I would certainly recommend starting with the ultrasound, and then we've got MRIs, and then if you choose, you've got mammograms, breast x-rays, let's be clear. So test of anatomy, ultrasound, you get an ultrasound probe and it bounces waves down in the breast, and then there's a detector there also. It detects them and puts them on a screen so that you can see them. And we've all seen that, mostly used what we think of usually in imaging babies and checking out the babies and making sure that they're okay. Its sensitivity and specificity is pretty good, a whole lot better than mammograms. So why aren't we using that? Well, it's not the standard of care. You're supposed to get a mammogram first. Well, why? Is there a state law that says that? Not in any state in the union. Is there an insurance law that requires the doctor to get a mammogram before an ultrasound? No. Why are we doing it? Why are we causing women to take cancer-causing x-rays before ultrasounds? Nobody can answer that question. There's no rationale, no logic. It's just what we do. So there's what ultrasounds look like. This is a cyst with actually a cancer growth. This is a solid tumor. This is a cyst with tumor in it. So that's kind of what those look like. And these are calcium deposits that would show up on a mammogram. Mammograms, so who are they recommended for? Women aged 30 and above is who they're recommended for. Sensitivity for women under 50, we've covered that, 52%. Specificity, here's a real fly in the ointment. For women that are said there's a possible abnormality, 95% of those that have a suspicious area do not have breast cancer. That's a very non-specific test. But did those women get another set of cancer-causing mammograms, x-rays? Yes. Maybe a biopsy? Yes, those biopsies aren't benign. If there is cancer there, it can spread it. If there's not, there's trauma. I had a personal friend that they tried to do a biopsy. They punctured her lung. She wound up in ICU for 3 days and in the hospital for a week and has never breathed the same since. So tests are not without complications. These things do happen. So there's flies in the ointment. Women who had been subjected to mammography screening. So one of the big flies is women forgot to die less often if they had mammograms. Contrary to the initial studies, the real actuarial studies that they die at the same rate. In fact, as Getschke showed, they die at a 4% higher rate if they get mammograms. Randomized controlled trials so this is from the American College of Physicians, peer-reviewed published literature in their journal. Randomized controlled trials consistently demonstrate no benefit from screening. This is published in the American College of Physicians journal. So why are we doing these? Well, it's what we do. It's the quote standard of care. Hospitals have invested in this equipment. Groups like Susan G. Komen, they make their money off of this, and they get huge donations from Siemens and GE and the companies that make these machines to recommend them. And the American College of Radiology, of course, they make money by reading them. The American College of Physicians, who doesn't have a dog in the fight, they don't read them or they don't get money from the manufacturers, and the U.S. Preventive Services Task Force have recommended against routine mammogram screening. So there is some reason beginning to happen out there. But, you know, if we get enough mammograms, then, hey, you've got a built-in clientele. Because if you give enough women mammograms, then you're going to have some breast cancer. You're going to cause breast cancer with these x-rays, and then you're going to have a patient. So it's actually a pretty good business model if you think about it. So a two breast, 4 films, 2 of each breast, gives you about 1,000 times the radiation of a single chest x-ray, except it gets worse than that. Because it's not spread out over the entire chest, it's very condensed into 2 breasts. How many of you would voluntarily stand in front of a chest x-ray machine and hit the button 1,000 times? Nobody in their right mind would do that, okay? Nobody in their right mind would do that. So the National Cancer Institute released evidence that among women under 35, mammography could cause 75 cases of breast cancer, that's for women under 35, for every 15 that I'd identified. So this is a cancer-causing machine. This is a cancer-causing test. Another Canadian study published in October of 92, we've known this since 92, that's found that younger women had a 52% increase in death rates when given annual mammograms. So we get back to the why. And, it just makes you scratch your head, shake your head, and wonder, like, what on earth is going on? This is supposed to be science. We're supposed to be trying to help our patients. We're supposed to be doing our very best here. It's incomprehensible. Another Canadian study, there is excess breast cancer mortality, and so it's not just women under 35, excess cancer mortality in women 40 to 49, and that there's no benefit for women 50 to 59. This is published in 92. So we've known this for 25 years. Swedish study published in 99. Mammography screening is ineffective. And recently in 2013, the Royal Society of Medicine, no evidence of positive benefit over 40 years. Why are we still doing these? I'm sorry, did you want to take a picture of that? Go for it. All right. last chance, all in. And so here's Peter Gutsy, MD, professor, and that works with the Nordic Conference Center. There was so much controversy. So what they do when you publish a study saying mammograms aren't safe or that may not be the best, they try to assassinate your character. They try to influence journals that they're giving money to not publish your articles. So he actually wound up writing a book about all the chicanery and all the double dealings and backstabbing and politics involved. So if you want to read about mammogram screening and some of the serious issues that have gone around there, get Peter's book. So here's Peter's final statement on the subject. Scientists are often driven by you just ask, why are we doing this? Why are the doctors defending it? Why are they still promoting it? And his response is, scientists are often driven by emotions, career aspirations, strong beliefs, money, and fame rather than facts and logic. When it comes to mammographic screening, the extent to which some scientists are ready to deny what they see and sacrifice sound scientific principle is astounding. So this was from the man that did the study. So mammogram sensitivity is way down there. Wide variance, and we've already covered that slide. I should have done that. Now, Joe Gibbles made an interesting statement. If you tell a lie big enough and keep repeating it, people will eventually believe it. Early detection saves lives. Get your mammogram today. And so it's been told to us thousands of times, you go to your doctor, get your mammogram. They will call you up on the phone and harass you to get your mammogram. Probably every woman in the audience has had that experience. So that's what I've got to say about that. So why? A 1 centimeter tumor is approximately 1 billion cells. Here, interestingly enough, even on the Susan B. Komen site, it shows the sensitivity of mammograms down around 40%. That's terrible. So thermography and ultrasound is what I recommend to women on a routine basis. You can choose to get a thermogram yourself from a qualified professional. Ultrasound, it literally actually does not take a doctor's prescription to get an ultrasound. If you can find someone locally, an independent ultrasonographer, you may be able to get an ultrasound without a doctor's prescription, or you may have to go in and fight your doctor, say, I ain't doing a mammogram, give me an ultrasound. And when they say, no, you got to get the mammogram first, you get in their face and say, are you denying me my health benefits? What state law says that I have to mammogram first? Does the insurance company get in their face? Does the insurance company say I have to have a mammogram first? So get in their face, demand your benefits, and ask for the ultrasound. If you can't get it done the other way, then you may have to use a little sleight of hand, schedule the mammogram one day and the ultrasound the next, and just forget to show up for the mammogram. Did I say that? Surely you wouldn't have to use any deviousness to get what you should be able to get done without it. So thermography is unique in that it shows physiology or what's happening as opposed to static images of anatomy. It can show pain. Did you know that you can see pain? Yes, you can see pain. On a thermogram, you can't see it on any other test. It shows inflammation. You can't see inflammation on any other test. It can show lymphatic congestion and shows the effect of radiation. So it's the only imaging test that has predictive value. Let's think about that. What does that mean? So an ultrasound, you have to have the cancer there big enough to see 1 billion cells, which is too late, before it can see it. MRI, same thing. Ultrasound, same thing. Mammograms, you remember our chart of the progression of a cancer cell's life? So way back down in there, maybe 3, 4, 5 years, those cancer cells were growing. they were recruiting additional blood flow so that they could grow faster. More blood flow spells heat. And all of those cancer cells aren't surviving as they grow. Some of them die. Cancer cells are very toxic for some reason. As they die, they're really hard for the immune system to reabsorb, and those toxins dilate the skin above them. And again, that's called heat. That heat comes out on the breast. So it's the only test that can show cancer coming down the road. And if you see the truck coming, you can get out of the road, or at least put some nails in the road to flatten the tires and slow it down. So if you know it's coming, then you can deal with it, because cancer in earlier stages is reversible. Contrary to what the medical establishment would like for us to believe, earlier stage cancers are reversible. So early detection does save lives. It can show us disease that's coming, and therefore we can prevent the disease from ever happening by making appropriate changes. What a novel idea. Preventing disease before it ever happens. Who would have thought of such a thing? And again, this is what that looks like. Thermal camera. You have to get unclothed, but nothing's going to touch you or smash your breast. You have to let the breast cool to a temperature common to the atmosphere, because you may have worn a bra. I'm going to recommend against that. And heated the breast up, so they have to have time to cool and normalize. And so here's the program that we invented, Dr. Greg Melvin, Linda Hayes, and myself, because there wasn't as good a technology out there as we wanted. So we created a system where you could detect the exact temperature of the nipple, and then create an ellipse and measure the global temperature of the breast. And then those same sizes are, when we go to the next breast, translated over there, and we position them in the same positions. And then we've got exact measurement, nipple to nipple and breast to breast, of the exact same size area. And so that's what that looks like. So you can see a little bit of lymphatic congestion here. The heat below the breast is normal because the breast hangs down, and so that you've got skin on skin there, and it touches, and so that heat is pretty normal. The nipple is supposed to be cooler, and so that's a normal looking nipple. This line right here is not normal looking. For many years, it was considered to be neovascularity by a lot of readers because they didn't do other tests of anatomy with them. Dr. Galina Magalko at Universal Medical Imaging, who's taken most of these slides, figured that out. Those are actually dilated milk ducts, and that makes total sense, ductal carcinoma. So she was the one that figured that out. Thermal imaging is not new. It's been around for centuries. Hippocrates would put mud on his patients, and wherever there was heat or disease, the mud would dry first. So heat imaging is not new. It's actually pretty ancient. We just have new technology to use it with. All right. If we could go to cue up the next lecture, I think we're repeating some of these slides. So, all right. Questions about mammograms before we start on the other, and then.
Wait for Mike. Hold on.
Okay. Mike. Mammograms, ultrasounds, MRIs, thermograms. The lady here in the fourth row had a question.
What if it's not really the breast, but on the side of the lymphatic, relate to the breast?
Yeah, there's many images.
That's what
I
my
just showed
mother
you,
had.
Yeah, I just showed you the forward images, but you put the arms up, you take side images, 45-degree images, you take lots of images. So yeah, you can see it if it's on the side of the breast.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Good question. Thank you.
I wanted to know, will there be any false positives with benign tumors, like fibroadenomas?
They usually aren't hot. They don't have an extra blood supply. There's not cancer cells dying there and dilating the tissue. So benign tumors don't show up on thermograms.
Okay, and like I've had biopsies done, so if there's scar tissue, that's fine too. They'll know that that's what it is.
Scar
It
tissue doesn't have a big blood supply. No, that won't show up.
And where do we find out where we can take this test?
I would Google thermograms and your city.
Okay, thank you so much.
And there are databases. I think there's a database on my website, drbenmd.com, at a place. Yes, ma'am?
Yes, I've been a holistic practitioner for many years. I'm very aware of mammograms. I've never gotten mammograms, so 100% with you. My question now is on the thermogram, this procedure. A friend of mine that goes to Mexico to a cancer clinic, she wasn't getting it done there, but she got a couple, her and her friends in the States, in California, in San Diego, some thermograms, and they didn't detect it. So my question is twofold. One, is there a machine that you like in particular? And second of all, is it also now on the way the technician will read it, since you were so specific in the duct area by the nipple?
Well, the technicians don't read them. There should be a physician reading them. Okay, technicians take the pictures. And no test is 100%. Remember, our sensitivity was between 80 and 90%. For thermograms, well, that means it's going to miss 10 to 20%. But that's a heck of a lot better than missing 50%. And that's why we recommend thermograms with an anatomical test, ultrasound. Then you increase your sensitivity way up into the 90s, because here's a couple of issues with thermograms. Number one, if you have a very, very slow-growing, non-aggressive tumor, it's not going to produce near as much heat. Secondly, I had a lady that I sent to Dr. Galena up in Los Angeles here last year, and I examined her breast after I took the thermogram. I have my own thermogram, and I'm going like, this doesn't feel good. And this lady says there's something wrong there, and I always believe my patients. They know it's their body. And so I sent her on up. Her thermogram was perfect. She had cancer in both breasts, so they were both hot. So those are the two conditions under which a thermogram can be negative. But no test is 100%. Biopsies aren't 100%. So no test is 100%. So yes, thermograms are going to miss a small percentage of breast cancers, like any other test. Yes, ma'am?
Answer to the other thing you said, should be with an MD, the thermogram. I was offered at a holistic center for them there, and they're not doctors, to do this thermogram. So then I shouldn't get it done then unless there's an MD to read it.
I've never seen a thermogram system where there wasn't a physician overreading them.
So maybe it's not I'm sure they're not all created equal, these thermograms.
Yeah, I only use FLIR cameras, the people that developed the technology in Norway for our military. They have great sensors. There are still some old cancers out there. If you'll see a mirror kind of flashing back and forth, and they're called fixed array cameras, that technology is 30 years old. So yes, I would ask, are they using a FLIR camera that has a good detector in it? So yes.